The world did not welcome them. 2 million years ago, the earth was still learning what it wanted to be, and in that uncertainty, it showed no mercy. The land stretched wide and unfinished, raw beneath a sky that offered no promises. The sun rose without kindness, burned without apology, and vanished each night as if abandoning everything that lived below it. They walked upright beneath that sky, small groups of fragile beings with narrow shoulders and long legs, their shadows stretching thin across the dust. They did not have a name for themselves. They did not know they were different from the creatures that hunted them. They only knew hunger, fear, and the instinct to keep moving. Each step forward was an act of courage they did not understand. The grasslands whispered with danger. Every sound could mean death. The low growl hidden behind tall grass, the sudden silence of birds, the wind shifting in a way that carried the scent of predators. Their eyes scanned the horizon constantly, not out of curiosity, but out of survival. To stop watching was to disappear. They had no shelter beyond trees and rocks, no walls, no doors. When night came, it swallowed them whole. Darkness was not peaceful. It was alive. It crawled closer with every heartbeat, bringing cold, unseen teeth, and the knowledge that something stronger was always nearby. Children clung to mothers. Mothers listened for footsteps that were not their own. The elders remembered paths that no longer existed, seasons that had changed without warning. Memory was their only map. Loss was common. Someone would walk behind the group one day, and the next day they would be gone. No explanation, no goodbye. Sometimes there were marks in the dirt. Sometimes there was nothing at all. They did not mourn loudly. Sound attracted death. Grief was silent, carried in slower steps and longer pauses. They learned early that the world did not care if they survived. Hunger followed them like a shadow. Some days they found fruit or roots. Other days they chewed bark or waited for weakness to pass. Meat was rare and dangerous to obtain. It meant approaching animals with sharp horns, fast legs, and deadly tempers. It meant risking everything for a chance to live one more day. Their hands were clever but unprotected. Stones cut skin as easily as flesh. Still, they learned to strike rock against rock, shaping edges sharp enough to tear and slice. The first tools were crude, uneven, imperfect like them, but they worked. And in that small success, something began to change. They were not the fastest, they were not the strongest, but they watched, they remembered, they learned. Storms came without warning. Rain flooded low ground. Lightning split trees open like bones. Wind howled across open land, stripping warmth from their bodies. They huddled together, sharing heat, listening to the sky rage above them. Many did not survive these nights. The cold crept in slowly, numbing fingers, slowing breath, quieting hearts. Yet still, some mornings, the sun rose to find them alive. One night, the sky broke open in fire. Lightning struck dry land, and flames climbed into the darkness. The group froze at the edge of the glow, fear holding them in place. Fire moved like an animal hungry, loud, unpredictable. Heat rolled outward, pushing back the night for the first time they could remember. They watched from a distance, eyes wide, hearts pounding. Everything inside them screamed to run, but something else held them there. Curiosity, need, a sense that this glowing thing might change everything. When the flames settled, when the heat softened and the light steadied, they moved closer, slowly, carefully. The warmth touched their skin, and they did not pull away. The cold retreated. The darkness stayed back. That night, predators kept their distance. Fire did not speak, but it taught them something without words. It showed them that the world could be pushed back, that fear did not always win, that survival was not only about running, it was about learning. They did not master fire that night. Many times after, they would lose it. Rain would steal it. Wind would scatter it. Carelessness would let it die. Each loss felt heavy, like losing a living thing, but they remembered it. They chased it. They protected it when they could, and when they had it, they stayed together. Slowly, almost without realizing it, they changed. Nights became gatherings instead of separations. Food lasted longer when cooked. Bodies grew stronger. Minds grew quieter, more focused. The world was still cruel, but it was no longer unbeatable. They began to walk farther. Leaving familiar land was terrifying. Every step away from known water, known trees, known paths felt like stepping into nothing. But staying meant starvation. Staying meant death. So they moved forward, guided by instinct older than fear. Some never made it. The land took them, the cold took them, the predators took them. But others kept walking, carrying memory, carrying fire, carrying the stubborn will to continue. They did not know they were beginning a journey that would last 2 million years. They did not know that countless generations would follow their footsteps, shaped by their choices, strengthened by their endurance. They did not know that one day, Far in the future, someone would lie awake listening to their story, heart stirred by the knowledge that survival itself can be an inheritance. All they knew was this: the world was dangerous, the night was cold, and tomorrow was not guaranteed. So they walked, and because they did, we are here. Please like, share, and subscribe my channel. Morning came slowly, as if the sun itself hesitated to return to such a harsh world. The air was thin and cold when they rose from the ground. Ash still clung to their fingers, dark marks left from the fire that had guarded them through the night. It had burned low, fragile and quiet, but it had lived, and because it lived, so had they. They did not speak of it. There were no words for gratitude yet, but their movements were different, now careful, deliberate, protective. One of them stayed close to the glowing embers, feeding them dry grass, broken twigs, anything that would keep the warmth alive. The fire had become more than light. It was memory. It was safety. It was the difference between night and death. When they walked that day, they walked together. The land stretched onward, unfamiliar and unforgiving. The grass grew taller in places, hiding danger. The ground hardened underfoot, then softened into mud near water. Their feet were sore, their bodies heavy with fatigue, but they did not stop for long. Fire demanded movement. To keep it meant to keep going. Hunger returned often. Some days they found roots thick with moisture, berries sweet enough to quiet aching stomachs. Other days there was nothing. Children cried until hunger took their voices away. Mothers pressed them close, sharing warmth and patience when food was gone. The elders watched the sky, the animals, the shape of the land, searching for signs only they could still read. When meat came, it changed everything. An animal fell not by strength, but by endurance. They followed it until its breath failed, until it could no longer run. When the stone-cut flesh and blood touched the ground, there was no celebration, only relief, only survival. Fire transformed the kill, flesh softened, fat melted. The smell carried far, and they ate quickly, always watching the edges of the world. Strength returned to their limbs. Sleep came easier. The children did not cry that night. Something new began to grow among them. They waited for one another now. The slow were not left behind so easily. The injured were not abandoned without thought. When someone stumbled, another reached out, not always from kindness, but from understanding. Alone, they vanished. Together, they lasted. Nights became circles instead of corners. Bodies formed barriers against the cold. Faces glowed in firelight, shadows dancing across skin. Hands moved as stories began to form simple gestures, repeated motions, shared understanding. Memory turned into teaching. They learned which woods burned best, which stones held heat, which places invited danger. Knowledge passed silently, absorbed through watching, through repetition, through survival. The world tested them constantly. Rain came heavy and sudden, stealing warmth and threatening the fire. Wind tore across open land, scattering sparks and ash. When fire died, fear returned immediately, sharp and familiar. Those nights were long. The darkness pressed closer. Predators grew bold. But each time fire was lost, it was found again. They learned to guard it, to protect it from wind, to feed it before it faded, to carry it carefully as they moved embers wrapped in bark, glowing softly, alive but fragile. The fire slowed their journey, but it made the journey possible, and so they left the land that had shaped them. The air changed first, then the animals, then the sky. The familiar sun felt weaker, the nights longer, new lands stretched ahead, unknown and indifferent. Fear returned, heavy in their chests. But they had crossed fear before. They had survived worse. Footsteps pressed into soil that had never known them. Paths formed slowly, worn by patience rather than purpose. Children born along the way learned to walk on foreign ground. Elders watched their birthplace fade into memory, then into nothing. Loss followed them still. Illness took some quietly. Injuries lingered too long. Cold claimed those who could not endure another night. Each absence left a space by the fire. Each space was felt. They did not mark graves. The land kept what it took, yet the group continued. Fire glowed against strange horizons. New stars appeared overhead. The wind spoke in unfamiliar voices. Still, the warmth remained the same. The light held back fear in the same gentle way. They began to understand something without ever naming it. Survival was not strength alone. It was patience. It was memory. It was care. Fire did not only protect them from the world, it bound them to one another. It taught them to wait, to share, to return. Around it, they became more than bodies moving through time. They became a people. They did not know they were changing the future. They did not know that their long walks would shape legs built for endurance, that their shared meals would shape minds capable of cooperation, that their quiet nights would lay the foundation for thought itself. All they knew was this: the fire lived, and as long as it lived, So would they. Please like, share and subscribe my channel. The cold did not arrive suddenly. It crept in slowly, almost politely, as if asking permission to stay. Seasons shifted in ways they did not understand. Rains came late or not at all. The air grew sharper, thinner, biting at skin that had known only warmth. The land hardened beneath their feet, and the world they had learned to read began to change its language. Ice was coming. At first it appeared as frost clinging to grass in the early hours, fragile and pale. Then it stayed longer. Water stiffened, breath turned white. Nights became trials of endurance. Fire burned lower, fighting wind and cold with quiet determination. Bodies huddled closer. Sleep came in short, restless pieces. Some did not wake. They moved because they had to. Staying meant freezing. Staying meant hunger without end. So they walked, following animals that traveled south, following the sun when it felt too far away. Their steps grew heavier, slower, yet they did not stop. The land punished hesitation. Food vanished, plants retreated, animals grew lean and dangerous. Hunts failed more often than they succeeded. The group grew quieter. Energy was precious. Words, gestures, even glances were used carefully. Death became familiar. It was no longer sudden like a predator's strike. It came quietly now, carried by cold, by sickness, by exhaustion that sleep could not cure. The old fell behind first, then the injured, sometimes the very young. They did not turn away. They stayed as long as they could. They shared heat. They waited. When the breath finally left a body, they did not scream. They did not run. They sat in silence, memorizing faces, touching hands one last time before the land reclaimed them. Memory became heavier than fear. The world stretched on, indifferent to their grief. Ice spread across valleys. Forests thinned. Rivers changed their paths or vanished entirely. The sky grew larger, emptier, pressing down on everything that moved beneath it. Still, they adapted. Their tools grew sharper. Stones were shaped with more care, more intention. Hands learned efficiency. Fire was guarded like life itself. They learned to read snow, to follow tracks nearly erased by wind, to recognize the silence that meant danger was near. Children born into this world knew nothing else. Cold was normal. Hunger was expected. Survival was taught through example rather than instruction. They learned to walk long distances before they learned to rest. And still, they lived. The world stretched on, indifferent to their grief. Ice spread across valleys. Forests thinned. Rivers changed their paths or vanished entirely. The sky grew larger, emptier, pressing down on everything that moved beneath it. Still, they adapted. Their tools grew sharper. Stones were shaped with more care, more intention. Hands learned efficiency. Fire was guarded like life itself. They learned to read snow, to follow tracks nearly erased by wind, to recognize the silence that meant danger was near. Children born into this world knew nothing else. Cold was normal. Hunger was expected. Survival was taught through example rather than instruction. They learned to walk long distances before they learned to rest. And still, they lived. Time moved strangely. Generations passed without notice. Faces changed. Bodies grew stronger, better suited for long journeys and harsh land. The dead faded into memory, then into instinct, then into the shape of their lives. Other humans appeared. They were different. Some were stronger. Some were faster. Some were clever in new ways. They rose, they struggled, and many of them vanished. The land remembered none of their names. Homo erectus endured. They did not dominate the world. They yielded to it, bending without breaking. When the cold advanced, they moved. When food disappeared, they waited or walked farther. When danger grew too great, they learned. Their strength was quiet. Their courage was ordinary. Their survival was relentless. Ice ages came and went. Warmth returned briefly, then faded again. Forests expanded and retreated. Seas rose and fell. Through it all, footsteps continued. Fires flickered against endless horizons. Lives began and ended without ceremony, yet each one mattered. They became the longest survivors the world had ever known, not because they were perfect, but because they refused to stop. In the deepest cold, when the world seemed determined to erase them, they carried on. In the emptiest landscapes, where nothing promised tomorrow, they walked forward anyway. They were shaped by time, carved by hardship, strengthened by loss. And still, they lived, unaware that their endurance was becoming a legacy, unaware that millions of years later, their survival would echo in the bones, breath, and blood of beings yet to come. They walked through ice, they walked through death, they walked through time itself, and they did not disappear. Please like, share, and subscribe my channel. There was no final day when the fire went out for the last time, no single moment when their footsteps stopped marking the earth. Homo erectus did not vanish the way storms pass or animals fall. They faded gently, quietly, almost respectfully, changing rather than ending. Time continued its slow, patient work. The world shifted again. Ice loosened its grip. Forests returned where stone and snow had ruled. Rivers found new paths. The air softened. New lives were born into a land that felt slightly kinder, though never safe. Their bodies changed with the world. Faces softened. Minds grew more curious. Hands learned new ways to shape stone, to shape thought itself. The children of Homo erectus carried something different inside them, not a break from the past, but an evolution of it. They did not notice the change. Each generation believed they were simply surviving, as those before them had done. They walked, they hunted, they gathered, they protected their young. Fire still burned, fear still came at night, love still existed in quiet gestures and shared warmth, but something deeper was forming. The patience learned over millions of years did not disappear. The endurance carved into bone did not fade. The instinct to cooperate, to share, to endure together remained, carried forward like an unbroken flame. Homo erectus became something new without ever truly leaving. Their long legs lived on in bodies built to walk across continents. Their calm persistence lived on in minds capable of planning, remembering, imagining. Their refusal to give up lived on in every human who would one day face darkness and choose to continue anyway. The world forgot their name, but it never lost their influence. No songs were written for them, no monuments raised. The earth itself became their record, paths worn smooth by countless journeys. Ashes buried deep in ancient ground, tools scattered like quiet testimonies to lives lived with purpose. And then, at last, they were everywhere and nowhere. They lived in the way humans walk without thinking. In the way we endure hardship longer than expected. In the way we gather when the world feels cold and uncertain. In the way we carry hope even when survival feels fragile. They are here now, in you, in your breath, in your heartbeat, in the strength you don't realize you carry. Every time you keep going when rest would be easier, you echo them. Every time you endure loss and still rise, you honor them. Every time you choose patience over panic, cooperation over isolation, you continue their story. They survived not for glory, not for memory, but for tomorrow. And tomorrow arrived. You are the proof. Long after their fires turned to ash, after their footsteps faded from the land, after time itself tried to erase them, Homo erectus remained quietly, faithfully inside the future they made possible. The world was young and cruel when they began. It is older now, wiser perhaps. But survival still matters, endurance still matters. And their story is not over, because it lives on, in every human who refuses to disappear. Please like, share and subscribe my channel.